Hey, welcome to another episode of Rocket Revenue, where we open source our entire sales and revenue process over here at Rocket Shipping. What I wanted to talk about wasn't exactly process driven, but something that's important to anybody that is involved in sales whatsoever, which is how to move up the ladder in sales, how to move up the company ladder from being at the very bottom all the way to moving your way up to the top, which I have done numerous times. I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this. I've been in sales for nearly 20 years, pretty respected across multiple forms of social media. You talk to anybody that's worked with me, they tell you that I'm an A plus player pretty much anywhere that I've been at. Yet at the past two out of three places that I've worked at, I started at the bottom. At Fleetmatics, although I was a national director of sales and outside door to door sales, I managed teams that had, or organizations that had nearly 100 people in them, layers of management. I started at Fleetmatics as a sales development representative, as a plain SDR. In other words, I'm booking the meetings for account executives, some of them 10 years younger than me when I started there when I was 29. And I worked my way up to become an account executive, to becoming a director of sales, and becoming their top director of sales at Fleetmatics, which was a company that turned into a $2.4 billion company. At Pandadoc, I moved over there and I actually got to start as a director because of what I did at Fleetmatics. But then after Pandadoc, I decided to try to go out on my own. Everything in tech sales completely fell apart over the past couple of years. It became incredibly difficult to find a spot that was willing to take me on, even though I have a stellar reputation. So I started here at Rocket Shipping, not as head of revenue, not as head of sales, as an account executive, but in reality, our account executives are kind of SDRs. Like, it's full cycle for the most part, but I was cold calling and booking meetings. That's what my job was when I started here. And now I'm head of revenue. I run everything when it comes to net new revenue, both on the sales side and on the marketing side. So I wanted to go over how I was able to do that at multiple different places, because trust me, there's going to come a point in your career, whether you are at the bottom right now or whether you're at the top, where you're going to have to start again, probably at a step, half step before or below where you're currently at. Or if you're at the bottom right now, you probably want to learn how to move up. Most people don't want to stay in that role. And a lot of people might say, well, it's kind of offensive to say that the SDR role is the bottom role. Well, listen, entry level, if you're looking to move your way up to the top, entry level is the bottom role. Then it doesn't mean that it's the worst role. It might be the best role that you've ever had. You love the role, you're happy with your compensation, and you don't want to move. You want to stay where you are. Well, you're a unicorn if that's the case. It's incredibly rare that that happens. You're also the most valuable person in the company if that's the case, but you're like one out of hundreds of people. It is incredibly rare that a sales development representative wants to just stay as an SDR. People generally want to at least move up to an AE role. A lot of people have desire to move into a leadership role for a boatload of different reasons. You know, sometimes you get a little bit more flexibility. You want to learn more things. You're enticed and you're excited by growth in your career. And also, obviously, you can make a lot of money as you move up. Now, you can make a lot of money in the roles that you're in, but what I found is where I've made the most money is in leadership roles or like borderline executive roles where I then have stock in these companies. And in two of them, I made, multiple six figures off of that stock. So I've kind of learned that that's the roadmap where you can make some pretty good money on top of everything else that you're already doing. So here's how I did it. And I will also say that this is how I did it. Does that mean that there's the only path is through exactly what I did? No, obviously not. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but this has worked incredibly well for me in my entire career. Anytime that I moved up, I applied these principles, and I've learned at the multiple different places where I've had to do this how to adjust that. And there are things that I've made adjustments on in this process that I do to move up anywhere that I've ever been at. First off, let me just cut that part right there. I had to mute my phone. So, first thing I always say is you want to be the first thing that I say when it comes to moving up is you want to be high value and low maintenance. And you want to communicate the opportunity that you want. So, what I mean by that in terms of high value, so let's say you're a sales development representative and you want to move over to be an account executive, you want to close deals. The first thing that I ask when people bring that up to me, people hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever. All right, do you have, are you at the top of the board? Are you in the top, two or three people? Because chances are, like we said earlier, all SDRs want to move to that AE role. So if you want to move and you want to get promoted from within, are you beating everybody else that wants to have that promotion? And if the answer is no, then why should you get promoted over anybody else that is above you on the board in terms of the production that they have? So you have to be high value. Now, admittedly, you can be too high value depending on where you're working at. I ran into this issue at Panadoc with Jed Marley. Jed was such a great producer as an SDR, and we had such few SDRs at the time that he was producing so much pipeline that if I was to promote him, it would have actually hurt us more than helped us. And I had to talk with Jed and say, listen, man, like, I want to move you up. I genuinely do. Even though, like, at the time, Jed was like 18. So I do want to move you up, and I want to move you up quickly. You got to understand the position that we're in. If I move you up, we have no pipeline and everything kind of falls out from underneath us. So what we're going to do is we're going to hire a few more SDRs. I am going to bust my ass on training them, getting them going. We'll do everything that we can to start to build that pipeline up. But this has to make sense for the business. Just because you're doing all the things that mean that you deserve to move up, it has to make sense. And that was a kind of a tough thing at the time that Jed almost had too much value. But I'd rather have too much value than not enough. So even in those cases, Jed did eventually end up moving up, and it was fairly quickly because I'm not a bad manager. So when I knew that we had this high value rep in Jed, I knew that we would lose him if we didn't find a way to get him a really clear path to the promotion that he wanted and the money that he wanted to start making. And we made concessions and we made the moves that were necessary to be able to move him up without losing all of our pipeline. And it worked. And it worked for a few years. So it worked really well with Jed. So that's the first thing, is high value. You want to be at the top of the board. If you're asking for an opportunity and you're at the bottom of the board, what are we talking about? You need to get noticed. And the first way that you get noticed is in your production. Now, as an SDR, another thing that I'll say is it's very easy to get noticed on your production early because, and I've said this in other videos in the past, sure, what's the big number that you're looking at, or the target that you have? A lot of times it's like a demo where they prospect showed up to the demo and the AE accepts that demo into their pipeline, whatever stage you guys call that, stage one, stage two, or anything like that. And that's the metric that you're looking for. So to get noticed, whoever has the most of that North Star metric is probably the person that's going to get noticed, but you can get noticed before you have those results, because any SDR manager, any manager in general, is looking at activity metrics. They're looking at them a good amount of the time. In other words, how many dials are you making? How many emails are you sending? What are you doing in terms of the actual output to try to get things into your funnel and move things along? You can lead the board in those categories your first day. You can have the highest metrics right off the bat by making, and you can get noticed right off the bat. And you should be promoting that. Should say to your manager after maybe a week or two of doing it, like, hey, man, I'm actually pretty excited because I know that the results are going to come, because I don't know if you noticed, but I am leading the board every single day in my dials and in my emails. You see, I didn't say that in like a super abrasive way or anything like that. I'm just telling them, hey, I'm excited. I know that I'm going to have a lot of opportunities starting to pop up because I know that what I'm doing at top of funnel is going to produce results because I am producing more activity than anyone else on the team day in and day out. And that will get in the back of your manager's head where they're like, all right, this is somebody that I like. This is somebody that I want to probably keep an eye on because they're leading the board in categories that I care about. And those categories have nothing to do with your skill. They have to do with your will. That's it. Are you willing to put the work in? And a lot of people aren't. And if you're putting the work in, you want to get noticed for it. So if they don't bring it up to you after a week or two, bring it up to them. Just do it in a way that's not abrasive, because that's step two, is you want to be low maintenance. What I mean by low maintenance isn't that whenever you have an issue, you never communicate it with your boss. You're just basically like you're not noticed unless it's for production. No, if you have an issue, you want to bring it over to somebody. But are you complaining, or are you providing potential solutions to an issue that you run into? So, for example, let's say, someone took a lead from you, you could say, hey, man, Bill took this lead from me and it should be mine and I want it. Or you could say, hey, I don't know if I'm off base here. I was working this lead and then I noticed that Bill started to work it. In our rules of engagement, who should this go to? And is there something that I could have done differently? Do you see how that sounds way different, one to the other? One is somebody that is high maintenance. They're a whiner. They're complaining. And the other one is someone that's low maintenance. They're not creating problems for their manager. And you could say, well, that's not fair. You shouldn't be always not trying to create problems for your manager. Well, listen, Do you want to move up or do you not want to move up? Because I can give you the playground, the playtime, the nonsense, Sesame Street, Disney Channel version of how to move up, or I can give you the actual version. You're in sales. When you're in sales, you need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're trying to sell. Now, if you're trying to move up the company ladder, who are you now trying to sell to be able to do that? It's your manager or whoever the hiring manager is for that role. So your manager might not be the DM for this sale, but they're definitely going to be your champion. And if you are constantly complaining, whining, causing problems, putting more on that manager's plate in the role that you're in, do you think that they would want you to move up to the next role where there's going to be more problems for you to deal with? No. So you want to come across as low maintenance as possible, as someone who can handle their own problems, or is at least not going to be emotional when they run into an issue and say, hey, you tell me, did I do something wrong here? Is there something I could have done differently? What does the rules of engagement say here? Do the extra work and come across as someone that is trying, at the very least, to be low maintenance. This goes a long way with managers. I can tell you now, when I'm considering people to move up, and I almost have exclusively in my career promoted people from within. I hate bringing people in from the outside for a senior role. I would much rather promote someone whenever I can. But when I do that, I'm looking at those options. First off, if an SDR says they want to be an AE, I look at where they are on the board. Across the board, are they dialing the phone? Because if they're really not dialing now and I need them as an AE to also find opportunities, you're definitely not going to dial as an AE because you have more responsibilities. You need to do demos, you need to do follow up, you need to work on getting better in the role that you're in. So, if you have to worry about all of those other things and your dials are already low as an SDR, now they're going to be non existent when I promote you. Or are your dials leading the board across the board as an SDR? All right, well, now when I move you into an AE role, I know that you've at least created the habit of not being afraid to pick that phone up and dial every day. So if you have less time to dial, I might not get 100 dials out of you, but I might get 40 to 50. And I know that you've got skill as well. So the chances are you're still going to be able to fill your funnel when need be. So you can see you need to have that high value. And also, again, if I'm promoting people from within, I want it to be fair. And to me, what I mean by fair is a meritocracy. So you get promoted off of your merit. So if you are leading the board and you want to get promoted, there's a way higher chance that you'd be considered. But if you're not producing those North Star metrics, those meetings booked that turn into something, a quality meeting, and someone else is, then how is it fair for me to promote you over them? Even if you are fairly high value or you're showing value and you're incredibly low maintenance, maybe you're likable and everything like that, it doesn't matter. You have to do both. You have to be so if you have to do both, you want to maximize both, right? I want to have the highest value possible and I want to come across as the most low maintenance, non problem employee that the company has. And generally, if I do both of those things, I'm going to be in good shape. And I could give you some examples of people that are really high value, but they were also high maintenance. I've worked with a boatload of those in my career because A players, a lot of the time, can turn out to be high maintenance. And the problem with that is that the second that they start to become low value or lower value, but their maintenance remains high, that's the time where people start to think, why are we keeping this person around? I've seen this conversation take place at multiple different high level sales companies where someone was really high value and they were really high maintenance. They were a pain in the ass to deal with, but then the value starts to dip. And then people are like, well, wait a minute, we're dealing with them and all of their, prima donna problems when we've got people that are at the same level, but they're way lower maintenance. Why are we dealing with this person? This person's taking too much bandwidth that we could have been spending on something else. That's a problem that you don't want to have. It's a scenario you never want to end up in, particularly if you want to move up. But even if you don't want to move up, that can mean a lot for your career and the opportunities that you get in the role that you're already in. But if you're trying to move up and you're that high maintenance person, no one's going to be interested in making you a larger problem than you already are. But if you come across like you're not a problem at all, in fact, you're the smallest problem or not a non existent problem compared to everybody else there, well, that's the person that we want to move up. That's the person that we want to work with at a deeper level than we currently have them at. High value, low maintenance. Next, you want to communicate your goals in terms of your career path. You want to do that with your manager. And I mean, you really could do it with anyone, but you want to make sure you communicate those things with your manager. One thing that I will say is you want to do the first two things before you get to the third. You want to have been high value and you want to have shown that you're low maintenance before you begin to really communicate those goals. And the reason why I tell you that is I've had a lot of people that come in as a sales development representative. I'm the manager, I'm the director, I manage the whole thing, right? And then they come in, and this isn't at Rocket, but this is at other places where people come in day one as an SDR and say, man, I want to become a manager here someday. I want to be an AE. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And it's like, all right, cool. That sounds cool. But one thing that I have learned is that anyone that usually talks that big game up front, it's rare that they deliver on it. I want you to bring me some quantifiable actual results before we have that conversation. Because I've learned over the years that that is meaningless. You communicating that before you've shown me any results, before you've shown that you're a high value employee, before you've shown that you're low maintenance. So if I've realized that, a lot of managers probably have as well. So one thing that I've learned is to show that you're high value first, to show that you're low maintenance first, show that you're a team player, then you communicate what your goals are. I even did this at Rocket Shipping. And when I got hired here, it was a very unique scenario because I had built up my TikTok where I'm right at around 30,000 followers. My LinkedIn is right around at 21,000 followers. And I do a lot of video content. People know just by watching my videos that I know what I'm talking about. It's very easy to see the real from the fake when it comes to sales gurus or whatever the hell you want to call it. So I already had that in the bag. And Gabe, who's our co-host, he's not here today, but he's also my boss, CEO, founder of Rocket Shipping. He knew those things ahead of time. I was brought in because Gabe was already a fan of my content. In fact, Gabe reached out to me. I didn't reach out to him, but the role that was available was an AE role at the time. And I was willing to take that. And I never said, "Oh, great, I'll move into an AE role, but just so you know, I don't want to be an AE. I want to move up." I didn't even say that. I said, "All right, let's go in here and we'll see what we can do." And I got in and I started to work on things and I started to show that I was high value and I definitely showed that I was low maintenance and I was always willing to help others. And that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. So, first one is actually, we'll just flip it around. This is what we'll talk about next. Always take on extra responsibilities if you have the bandwidth. So, this is something that I've always done in my career. And a lot of people will say, well, companies will take advantage of you if you do this. And I am a huge fan of people saying that. And I'm a huge fan of people agreeing with that and listening to it because I want an edge. And any time that people talk about how things should be and what you should do, and people start to agree with it, that opens up an opportunity for me to go the extra mile and whip their ass. So I'm very fine with that, where it's like, oh, you shouldn't be taking on extra responsibility. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't take on. Good, good, good. I agree. You should never take on any extra responsibility because guess what? I'm going to. And even though you started here 3 years before me, I'm going to become your boss because I'm going to do all of those things that you said that you're not supposed to do or you shouldn't have to do. And I'll take advantage of the fact that you're willing to do that. And whether or not it's reality, I will manufacture a new reality based on the responsibility that I took because the manager might even agree with you. They might even say, you know what, you shouldn't have to do that. But if I'm saying I want to do it anyways and I'm doing that, which one do you think is going to get promoted? You or me? It's me every time because there's going to come a time where you're a manager or where you're an AE and you're asked to do something that really isn't within your job title. And you're going to say, well, that's not within my job title. I'm not supposed to do that. And no one, that's again, high maintenance. I want to be low maintenance, but at the same time, I want a free tryout. And when you accept extra responsibility before you get a title, that's a tryout. And you could say, oh, I've been burnt by this in the past. People have. People absolutely have. But I've also won by doing this at the same time. I'd much rather take the swing and potentially strike out than stand in the batter's box and watch the balls go by and strike out anyways. I'm going to try. I'm going to do everything that I can in my power to put myself in the best position to increase the chances that I'm going to be able to move up into the role that I want. And the easiest way of doing that, in my opinion, is always being willing to take on extra responsibility so long as you have the bandwidth for it. So, first off, you act as if. So, when I started here at Rocket Shipping, I was an account executive. But number one, I have a boatload of content out there where any of my peers who were the other sellers here, if they were to take a look at it, they would know that I have great experience and I might not know this industry, but I know sales really well and I'd be able to help them. And I'm willing to help right away. When people say, hey, I'm having trouble getting past the gatekeeper, having trouble booking a meeting, I'm willing to help them on that that day, even though I might have just started a couple of days ago. Fleetmatics, I was training my peers that were in my training class within a week of me being in the company. And you might say, man, that's presumptuous. I was already beating the other SDRs within a week of being in the company. I was booking more. I was having more sell because it was a very transactional sale. And then I was like, all right, cool. Let me show you guys what I'm doing that's working, what I've picked up on that I think might help because we're all in the same stage of our growth here. How do you think the managers felt about that? I am at a way higher value than anybody else that's there. If they're going to consider someone for a management role, they're already seeing me duplicate myself in others. No one asked me to. That's not my job, but I had the ability to do that. So why wouldn't I? If it's going to make me look better, it's probably a good idea to do it if I have the bandwidth, and I did. So at Fleetmatics, the way that I moved up, first off, I did that, and also there was a mass exodus in the office that I was in Clearwater, where a bunch of people left to a different company. So I was able to move into an AE role fairly quickly because I knew some people there. They knew that I had closed deals in the past, and also I was high value and I was low maintenance. I was helping others. I was showing that I had the value and I had the reputation, and I there was no one else that was even worth considering compared to what I had done, even though it only took me a month and a half to move from an SDR over to an AE. By the way, I noticed this. I noticed this on Reddit and everything like that. Someone hit me up on LinkedIn the other day and they said, "Hey man, you ever like search your name on Reddit? Like people are talking about you on there." And it's usually positive. But I have noticed a few people that said, "Have you looked at his LinkedIn profile? He was an SDR for 2 months." Boy, stop. I beat the block up in door to door sales, 100% commission for 5 or 6 years before I ever moved into tech sales. And that SDR role isn't a damn thing compared to the heartbreak, the pain, the difficulty, the resistance that you get in door to door sales. So, yeah, I was an SDR for a month and a half or 2 months, but I was a monster in outside sales, both B2B and door to door before that. So, I don't know, go fuck yourself, whatever. We can beep it out later, right? So when I was at Fleetmatics, I moved to an AE role fairly quickly doing that, and then I was looking to move into a director role. I had managed in the past. I'd been a national director of sales and door to door, and I wanted to move up. So how did I do that? I was willing to take on additional responsibilities, and I didn't ask for somebody to say, "Hey, would you mind doing this?" I was proactive about it. Like, "Hey, I noticed that you're doing morning meetings. I've done a boatload of morning meetings, and I was obviously leading the board at the time as well. You want me to cover some stuff? I can give it to you ahead of time. I wouldn't mind helping out with those. I'm very good at running meetings." And then eventually, within like a few weeks, I ended up running pretty much all of the meetings for the SDRs. That was my job, but I was good at it. So I got into that role and I started to level up the SDRs. Also, we were doing nothing in terms of looking at KPIs, looking at, what the conversion rates are from one step to the next, both at the SDR level and at the AE level. So I went to my manager and said, "Hey man, like I can spin up through Salesforce and through Excel all of these different things where we can get a way better look at trends in terms of like where closing percentage is, where we might be dipping, things that we might want to focus on. I have no problem doing that for you. I'll get all of that over to you." And obviously, my manager's like, "Hell yeah, like, yeah, get it over to me." And then I made sure that my manager promoted that and the things that I was doing to our regional vice president because my manager knew that eventually my goal was to move into a director role, but I was willing to do a boatload of work to help his life before I ever moved into that role if it ever was to become available on a different team. High value, low maintenance. Then I was proactive about communicating my opportunity and where I wanted to move up. So that was the first thing. At Panadoc, it was also something similar. So I started at Panadoc as their director of sales development. I did not manage closers, but at Fleetmatics I did, and I was more managing the inbound side than the outbound side at Panadoc. And Panadoc was looking for someone to take on the entire outbound target for the company. And the year before, they had done not much in outbound. It was a primarily inbound company. They'd probably done like 100 grand. And the next year, they were looking to do 1 million. And Panadoc at the time was mostly like a SMB type of deal. So this was a target that no one wanted to touch with a 40-foot pole, going from 100 grand to 1 million when everyone had only seen the success that they had had on inbound. I had no problem going outbound. All my career, I've gone outbound. And I look at opportunity like that, like the game of risk. I want all of the territory that I can get. I want to take as much as I possibly can because the more territory that I can get and I can show success with, the more opportunity that I'm going to get in the future because people realize that they can trust me. So I said, hey, I'll take that whole target. I'll 10x it right now. No problem. I'll take $1 million target and I'll take the AEs, I'll take the outbound, I'll manage them, no problem. I already see a few things that we could do that would raise conversion rates. And sure enough, I took that target and we actually hit. We went from 100 grand to 1 million. And then they were willing to build out my team a lot more. They were willing to layer management a lot more for me because now they realize that they could trust me with big numbers that other people were afraid to take. So, same thing, Fleetmatics, Panadoc, I look at it like it's the game of risk. Right now, I might be just the United States, but I'm already eyeing Canada. I'm already eyeing Mexico. I'm already looking to move into South America. I want as much territory as I can handle. So you have to have the bandwidth for it, but I want as much territory as I can possibly get. And then the goal is to level up the territory that you already have. You can't ignore what you've got. And to also level up the territory that I've now been given, because then what's the natural inclination of leadership from there? We crushed it at this thing. We gave them something else, crushed that. Why don't we give them more? And with more comes a higher title that's going to help you in your career. Anyone who tells you that titles don't matter probably has a title that you already want, so they don't want you to believe that it matters, but it absolutely does. The title that you have in sales determines the level of stock that you're going to get or equity within the company. It determines something that's called comp bands. So they'll say, "Oh, well, your compensation band is for this level, and we can't give you any more than the level that you're at because then you'd be making more than the person that's in the comp band level above you." So titles matter in terms of how you're able to be compensated. And also, titles matter if things don't work out at that company. If you decide that you want to move over to somewhere else, Fleetmatic's perfect example. I'd never been a director of sales in tech sales, but then I did it at Fleetmatics. I went from SDR to AE to director of sales. And then when I went to Panadoc, I didn't have to start as an SDR anymore. I had already been a director of sales at a company that was acquired by Verizon for $2.4 billion. Now I get to go from director to director. And then I got to move from director of sales development to director of sales. Good equity. That company becomes a $1 billion company. Man, things are going well. Then I had to move back down, which it probably won't be the last time that that happens. But man, it was worth it. So always be willing to take on additional responsibilities. At Rocket, I even did the same thing. You know, again, I came in here as an account executive, really an SDR, and then I moved to head of sales Q3 of last year of 2023, where I managed the sales team, working on net new revenue. We didn't really have someone that was like a marketing manager here, but we had a marketing team. And I had noticed with the marketing team that there was a lot of like serious talent in terms of creativity. But I noticed that like the creativity might have been pointed in the wrong direction. If you look at our TikTok, you could see this, where like most of our TikToks are about how we're trying to sell people, but the company is not a sales tool. Rocket Shipping is it's a third it's a TMS. It's third party logistics. We're handling freight for companies. So anytime that we're talking about sales, we're not going to get our ICP to care about that content. The content was good though. It was good content. It was just pointed in the wrong direction. And I realized quick, it's like, man, this is a lot that I could do to help. I've seen really strong marketing orgs. Panadoc had a phenomenal one and it was in-house. And I saw how well Fleetmatics did as well. And I was like, I think I can handle this. I think I can take this on. And also, like I've marketed myself and built up a pretty solid following. So I started to do that over here. I said, hey, I'm willing to help with this. And then my thought right off the bat was I need to show tangible value here quickly that we can handle this and that I can continue to handle this because, candidly, which one makes more? Head of sales that only operates the sales side or head of revenue that's also shown that they can crush it on the marketing side? When it comes to equity, which one do you think gets more equity? Oh, none of this is stuff that I've even discussed with Gabe, but I'm giving you the actual keys of the way that I actually look at these things. Because the more value that I can show, and the more that I can handle, and the more that I have had a direct impact on the number for the company, the more income I'm going to be able to get 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100. So, again, high value, low maintenance. Then you communicate the roadmap that you want to be on, how you want to progress your career with your manager. And also, always be willing to take on more responsibilities, more territory when you have the bandwidth. Keep in mind, if you don't have the bandwidth, You really want to find a way to get the bandwidth if you can. Take a inventory of everything that you're doing throughout the day, and is there a way that you could become more efficient where you could free up some bandwidth? And if you can't, then you're just going to have to be as high value as possible in the role that you're in until bandwidth frees up, hopefully. This isn't a requirement, but if you have the bandwidth, this really helps if you can try to take on more responsibilities as you go. Next, have big picture patience and urgency. Have big picture patience and urgency. So, what do I mean by that? Well, when I was at Fleetmatics, for example, I started as an SDR and moved into an AE role. There was no available director of sales role. And Fleetmatics was a kind of unique company. Everyone was making phenomenal money. Over a quarter of the office, and this is a decade ago, was making 100 grand or more. So people didn't really leave, and they never lost an A player. And if you were a director that was making money, you had equity too. There was no way that you were leaving. So I had no reason to believe that there was ever going to be an open director role anytime soon. Yet I still made sure that I was high value, low maintenance. I communicated the roadmap and the career progression that I wanted to have with my manager. I took on additional responsibility, and I continued to do that until the second director there, not my boss, but the other boss that had another team there, got asked to move to Australia to open up the Australia market. And all of a sudden, there's a director role available. I had big picture patience. I knew that eventually a role would come up. And if I put the work in that no one else was willing to do, because why would you put that work in when there's no role available? I knew eventually there would be one. And if not, I would still become more entrenched in the role that I was in by providing more value. So it was a win win either way. But once he left and moved to Australia, there is literally no other option but me. I'm a top performer as an account executive. I help work with the SDRs already, and the next role is being a great account. You have to be able to manage account executives and SDRs as a director of sales. I've already proven that I could do both. I was a top performer as an account executive. So when you have me manage other top performing account executives, they respect me. And I knew that I had to outperform some of these monsters if they ever would want to work with me as their manager. I can give you an example of one. Still a good friend of mine to this day. His name is Mike Fusil. And at Fleetmatics, Mike was basically like the logo. He was like the Jerry West in the NBA of Fleetmatics. He had won like 3 or 4 Rolexes as the top salesperson, and he forever was dominating. And when I became an account executive, like my North Star goal was to try to outperform Fusil because I knew that if I was going to move into that director role, it probably wouldn't be the role of my boss because my boss was young. He had just been promoted. He ain't going anywhere. And I had known him for a while. I knew that he wasn't planning on moving anywhere. It probably would have been the other team. And Fusil was on the other team. So that means that I would have to manage him. The only way that I can manage him is if you respected my process and my ability in that same role. And I told him that. The day that I got promoted, I sat down with Fusil and I said to him, man, you have no clue how much work I have put in just to try to earn your respect in case this day came where I would end up being your manager because you are so good that I knew that if I tried to give you any advice, if I didn't show and prove on the board month in and month out, why would you take any advice from me? Why would you even want to work with me? And Fusil, like borderline teared up a little bit when I went over that with him. And he knew right off the bat that I cared. And I cared about him and I cared about his success. And that's a big part of leadership. People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's a relationship that started in like 2014, working with Fusil. I still talk to him almost every day. In fact, in all of my content, you'll see behind me, it's at the very top right here. You can probably see there's a framed Tom Brady jersey that my team got for me at Fleetmatics. And Fusil was making the most money. He probably put the most in and chipped the most in for that. That's how much my guys really, rocked with me. And it's because of that investment that I made. But I knew that I needed to be a top performer, long story short. So always take on extra responsibilities, have big picture patience. That just shows the patience, right? And have big picture urgency. So on the urgency side, it's not urgency to get promoted. You have big picture patience. In other words, I'm going to do all of the things that are going to make me, it's not even in the judges' scorecards anymore. It's a guarantee that I'm going to move up because I'm doing so much responsibilities that are at the next level. I've already proven that I can handle them, and everybody messes with me. And that's important, by the way. Your peers are who promote you, not your boss, not, not the hiring manager. At the end of the day, usually in sales organizations, if you want to move up from within, a huge determining factor of that is if you were to ask everybody in the organization who should move up next, would they say your name or not? And if they wouldn't, chances are you're not going to be able to move up or you're never going to. And I actually said that to our RVP at Fleetmatics. I remember it like it was yesterday. We're at the Brown Boxer in Clearwater at the bar. And he said, why should you get promoted over anybody else? And I told him, I said, man, the way that I've always looked at it is you're not the person that promotes me. Travis, who is my manager, he's not the person that promotes me. The office is who promotes me. And if you wanted to go around and ask everybody else on this sales floor who should move up, I guarantee you that all of them would say that it's me because they know that I put in the work and they know that I'm a leader and they would want to work for me based on all of the work that I've put in over the past few years or the past year. Forgive me. It took a year, for a little bit under a year for me to get promoted all the way up to director at Fleetmatics because, again, I was doing all of that extra stuff ahead of time. So that's the patient side. The urgency side isn't to be promoted. It's more you have urgency to show that value quickly. So when the time comes, you get it. So a way of putting that is again, I had big picture patience for the role. So I wasn't going to do the work because I couldn't see the finish line. I just had faith that the finish line would eventually materialize. But I also had the urgency to start proving my value for the role way before a role ever even materialized. Both of those things are important if you want to move up in a company. Big picture patience and big picture urgency. So from there, I'll give you one more thing that I learned a while back, but I think is incredibly important. So, perceived value actually trumps results. You really want to have both, but perceived value in terms of your career and how you're viewed in the company, how you're viewed by your peers, your leaders, maybe even people that you would say are underneath you or report to you in your organization, how they perceive your value trumps the actual results that you're bringing in. And I never used to look at things that way. I came up in a lot of real toxic environments, but also the environments that I came up in. By the way, I'm not complaining about that. I actually thrived in those toxic environments. But they were incredibly results driven environments where results were all that mattered. So that's how I focused. It was what do I need to do to produce the most results physically possible? And that's all that mattered. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make money. Maybe I make some friends in the meantime. Great. But goal number one is value and results. I was not a big networker. I wouldn't go around shaking hands, saying hi to everybody. All I was worried about was my results because once you saw my results, you automatically probably would want to move me up. And what I learned is that actually doesn't matter at the end. Like it does, but it doesn't matter as much as your perceived value. So I always looked at it at first, like at the end of the day, if I'm beating everybody in terms of the actual results and value that I bring to the role that I'm in, that I'm good and I'm going to progress my career. That's not the metric that you want to look at in terms of your progress day to day. What you really want to look at is at the end of the day, is my perceived value with my boss, with my peers, with anyone that reports to me, with anyone in other other orgs in the company, is my perceived value at the end of the day today higher than it was at the start of the day? And if the answer is yes, over time, and you have to do it every single day. If the answer is yes, over time, if you can combine that with the high value and the results and the low maintenance, it makes it really impossible for you to not get promoted because you've probably seen this before. You've seen someone that's really good at networking and making friends and warming up to the boss and to other people in the company. And then when it comes time to promote, sometimes they actually trick them and they end up getting promoted even though they're not producing any results. I've seen it before. I've seen it. I'll probably see it again. I've seen it a bunch of times, but that is a factor. So I used to look at those people like, man, screw them. That's not the way that I do things. The way that I do things is I bring in results and they'll promote me off of my merit and off of my results. I'm not that type of guy. I'm not going to do that. The more that I thought about it, it's like, but wait a minute, that does factor into a decision. What do they always say? People buy from people that they like. I actually don't believe that, but I do believe that people buy from people that they trust. And I believe that people want to work with people that they like. So if you're looking to move up within a company, if your boss promotes you from SDR to AE, your boss is probably going to spend more time with you the higher up that you move up within their organization, because now you're handling higher value parts of the sales process, higher conversion rates, bigger deals. So, do they want to work with you or do they not want to work with you? And I don't care. I've worked with plenty of people that I really like, but I like the results that they brought in. But a lot of managers will look at you, and if you're abrasive, and if you're not somebody that's really kind of warmed up to them and tried to build a relationship with them, but someone else did, they might not have your results and they might actually get your next job before you can get it. So I looked at it like, well, why wouldn't I want to do both if both increase the chance of me moving up? This took a long time for me to learn, a long time. And it doesn't mean being fake. I network with people now when I never used to. I used to go to President's Club at Fleetmatics, and I used to sit at the table, and I used to tell all my salespeople that reported to me. I was like, my numbers speak for themselves. I'm not big on networking. I'm really here to celebrate with you guys. If someone wants to talk to me, they can pull up. And that's how I looked at it. It sounds terrible, but that was really my attitude towards it. And then you come to realize, like, wait a minute, this is like multi-threading on an enterprise level deal. Why wouldn't I want to build a relationship with everybody else that's here? Why wouldn't I want to get those people to like me? By the way, I've ended up working with people that I never knew outside of those president's clubs after I realized that it's important to build those relationships with these heavy hitters, not just for at Fleetmatics, but eventually we're not all going to work here. We're going to move on somewhere else, and they might have an opportunity for me. But they can have an opportunity for the dickhead that was at President's Club, or the one that was willing to be nice to everybody, that was being, and it's just having genuine interest in people and getting to know them. You don't have to be fake at the same time. It's more fun to go through life getting along with people and getting to know people and taking a chance and assuming the positives in people. And if you do that when you're networking, it does two things for you. Number one, it's just a better way to go through life. But number two, more people will like you. More people will rock with you. The more people that rock with you, like you, are connected to you in some way, and have an investment in you because of the relationship that you've built, the higher chance that you're going to be able to move up, particularly within your company or within the location that you're at or the organization that you're at. The perceived value of you, both the results, whether you're low maintenance, whether you're helping people out, whether you're building relationships with people, whether or not they like you, these things matter. And again, you can look at LinkedIn, you can look all over the place, and they will tell you that none of those things should matter. And you know what? There's a chance that they're right. But the reality is, it still does matter. So you can buy what they're selling on LinkedIn, or you can take advantage of it. And what I mean by that is you'll realize that everybody else does buy into that. Oh, yeah, it shouldn't be that way. And you can just nod your head and say, yep, that's right. Shouldn't be that way. And then you do it anyways. And it will separate you from everybody else that you're working with and put you in the best position to be able to move up. I hope that this was helpful. I can tell you, I don't know anyone that has moved up in really high level organizations more times than me or faster than me. These things work. They're not the only way of being able to do it, but this is my roadmap. I gave you it all. I even gave you behind the scenes stuff that I haven't communicated with Gabe. Gabe will look at this and see my playbook on how I plan on moving up within the organization that I'm in right now. But I mean, I guess I can't really move up much higher than where I'm already at. And it only took me 6 months, you know? So, the shit works. So well, that's it this time. If you guys like this, or if you have any additional questions, on our YouTube, you can comment it. If you're listening to this on Spotify, just connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Troy Barter. I accept all LinkedIn connections. Feel free to hit me up, and I'll do whatever I can to try to answer your questions. If you have them, comments, things that you think are wrong, things you think we should talk about in future episodes, either leave a comment, connect with me, let me know. We want to provide as much value as physically possible on this podcast. And I know that this was a little bit more of a departure from what we typically do in terms of how we're building things out at Rocket. But the reality is, this is a big part of how we built things out at Rocket, because if I didn't do these things, we wouldn't be building out what we're doing right now, because I'd still be an account executive here. And I'm providing a lot of value in terms of how we're going to scale this company. But if I never took a chance, if I never did all the things that I just described, I'm still sitting here as an account executive, and we aren't even close to where we are going to be in the next year or two. And that's it.